Right, let us come to the first... Might work. Let us come to the first statement. Secretary of State for Education.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. With permission, Mr Speaker, I would like to make a statement about this Government's plans for children's social care. I know all members here today will agree that caring for vulnerable children is amongst the most vital responsibilities of any government. And this Government treats no issue with more importance than the urgent challenge of improving children's social care. This is a new era of child-centred government, of putting children first. That's how we achieve our opportunity mission, how we break the unfair link between background and success, how we support families to achieve and thrive. Our mission applies to all children, especially the most vulnerable. Those for whom childhood is a storm of instability, neglect and even violence, denied the foundation of love that is the first right of any child. Children's social care alone cannot right all these wrongs. We need a joined-up approach across government and beyond. That's why mission-led government is so important. But done well, children's social care empowers families to support their children, putting them back on the path to happy, healthy lives. So it is with great concern that I come here today to tell members what they must already know. The system which this Government has inherited from members opposite is broken. It is failing far too many children. It is being kept alive by the efforts of our amazing workforce. And Mr Speaker, I want to thank all of those working so hard to keep our children safe. But children's social care is struggling under an impossible weight. We have more children in care in this country than ever before. And with more and more money following children into the most expensive part of the system, resources are sucked out of preventative services, pushing yet more young people into care. And so the vicious cycle continues. Higher costs, poorer outcomes. A cycle that my honourable friend, the member for Whitehaven and Workington, rightly identified in his review over 2 years ago. A broken market for care, vulnerable to the shameful profiteering of too many private companies. Local government spending on children's social care has risen by £4.4 billion over the last decade. And what do we have to show for it? A system too busy treating symptoms to tackle causes. A system that costs more for taxpayers but delivers less for families. A system that is failing our children and which is crying out for change. Today, Mr Speaker, this Labour Government begins that change. Ambitious, wide-ranging reform to lift the life chances of our most vulnerable children. I am pleased to announce the publication of a policy statement that puts children's social care back in the service of children and families, breaking the cycle of crisis intervention. This is the biggest reform of children's social care in a generation. And it starts with the acknowledgement that wherever possible, children should remain with their families. That is where children belong. It is on that foundation of family love that children can live happy lives. That's why early intervention, tackling problems before they escalate, holds the key to brighter futures for our children. So we'll simplify the way we fund local government next year, consolidating more than £400 million of children's social care funding within the local government finance settlement. And with immediate effect, we will suspend the payment by results aspect of the Supporting Families funding. We'll renew the way that we work with the sector, co-designing services together to meet the needs of children and families in their communities. The Deputy Prime Minister and I are ambitious about reforming how we work with children and families, from when they encounter challenges right through to building solutions. We will set out funding plans for children's social care and future investment in preventative services in the upcoming local government finance settlement. All families face challenges at one time or another. I want to help them come up with their own solutions wherever possible. So we will legislate to embed family group decision-making as an offer that all families can access. Early targeted support minimises more costly and disruptive intervention later. So it is much better value for taxpayers. But ultimately, that isn't the point. The most important point is that it's better for children's lives now and into the future, building that bedrock of family love and support that we all need. We know we also have to have strong child protection measures in place. So today I'm setting out plans to require every council to have multi-agency child safeguarding teams, consulting schools and teachers to stop children from falling through the cracks. Sometimes, despite the best efforts of all involved, children cannot remain at home. Our priority then is to support children to live with kinship carers or in fostering families, connected to extended family in a stable home. That's why I was not just pleased but deeply proud when the government announced the largest ever national investment in kinship care at last month's budget. An investment in the future of vulnerable children. That money will trial a new kinship allowance to help family members and friends care for vulnerable children. And we'll extend the Virtual School Head programme, placing it on a statutory footing, championing the education of children in kinship care. But, Mr Speaker, even with these changes, there will of course remain instances in which children must enter the care system. So it is absolutely vital that we fix the broken care market. We know that the quality and safety of children's homes in England is simply not good enough. Year after year, the previous government sat on its hands while children were let down, their life chances wrecked, their hopes dashed, their dignity ignored. I know many members opposite shared the disappointment that I felt as ministers in the last government ignored these issues, left them to drift when they could have gripped them, as this government does today. So we will act decisively, helping children to remain close to the people who love them wherever possible, and ending the reckless profiteering of some providers. We will rebalance and stabilise the placements market, including through establishing a financial oversight scheme for the very first time. We'll make the market more transparent and empower local authorities to collaborate on placements, including through regional care cooperatives. We'll give Ofsted the powers to move more quickly against unregistered care providers and tackle patterns of poor care. These are actions to fix the care market. But be in no doubt, if companies continue to make extreme profits at the cost of vulnerable children, I will go further and harder. We will introduce new powers that allow government to directly cap the level of profit from children's social care placements. At their best, private providers can help improve the lives of vulnerable children. But where the focus drifts towards exploitation in the pursuit of profit, be in no doubt, I will act. These are the reforms to deliver the best placements for children. But the journey doesn't end there. We must give young people leaving care the right support as they transition to adult life. So I was pleased to co-chair the Care Leaver Ministerial Board alongside the Deputy Prime Minister earlier this month, where we'll drive forward action across government. And we'll expand the Stay in Close programme into a national entitlement of enhanced practical and emotional support for care leavers. It's time to fix the foundations of children's social care, investing the groundwork for a stronger sector, and that includes data. We will deliver on our manifesto commitment to improve the sharing of information for the benefit of all children, including those in care. And we'll change the law in two ways. Firstly, to introduce provisions for a single unique child identifier to join up data from different services. A further step towards ensuring services work harder for children, parents and professionals. And secondly, to establish a new duty, providing a clear legal basis for those working with children to share information for the purposes of safeguarding. We are determined to make sure that children's social care is an excellent place to work. We've published online resources to improve the health and well-being of staff. And we're joining with the National Workload Action Group to cut unnecessary tasks, freeing up staff to concentrate on children and their families. And while agency workers can help manage fluctuations in demand, they are no substitute for a permanent workforce. Children and families deserve stable professional relationships. So we will limit the use of agency social workers by local authorities, acting to reverse the alarming increase in their prevalence. Mr Speaker, every child deserves the best possible start in life, to grow up in a family filled with love. But not every child gets that. There are still far too many who lack the stability, safety and love they need to go on to happy and healthy lives. Our opportunity mission is for them. We are breaking down barriers for them, and the announcements I have brought to this House today are for them. But, Mr Speaker, we cannot achieve this alone. Keeping children safe is everyone's business, not merely mine, not simply this government's, but the work of each of us in this House and all of us across this country. We need partnership with families, the workforce, carers, providers, health, police, schools and colleges, and yes, with members right across this House too. Today is the start of much needed change. Change that will fix children's social care. Change that will keep families together where possible and children safe where necessary. Change, Mr Speaker, that will give each and every child the best start in life. The children of our great country deserve nothing less. And I commend this statement to the House.
Senate Secretary Laura Trott.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of her statement. Mr Speaker, I welcome the focus from the Government today on children's social care and on the profiteering issues that we identified and set up the Market Intervention Advisory Group to look at when we were in government. However, the heart of the problem today is a lack of high-quality places available for looked-after children. That is what is causing the high cost of placements as demand is outstripping supply. A CMA report in 2022 did not recommend a profit cap because, and I quote, "The central problem facing the market is a lack of capacity." It concluded, Mr Speaker, that taking measures to limit profitability of providers risks increasing the capacity shortfall. So while I absolutely share the Secretary of State's desire to ensure we're getting best value for the taxpayer in this sector, I would argue that the capacity issue is what we need to solve first. Otherwise, she risks, ironically, driving up prices and exacerbating the shortage of places. The last government took steps at the budget in April to address the capacity side, with £165 million allocated for building and maintaining placements for looked-after children. I note that despite the welcome money in the most recent budget for kinship care, there was not any more money in the budget for increasing the number of looked-after children's places. This is essential. Otherwise, the strategy set out today on places simply will not work, I'm afraid. So can I ask the Secretary of State, what plans has she made for increasing the capacity of places for looked-after children? How much will she need to fund this? And did she ask the Treasury for this money at the most recent budget? What is the Secretary of State's assessment of the impact of the changes today that will have on the number of places available for looked-after children? The review carried out by the now member for Whitehaven and Workington, commissioned by the Conservatives in government, said that profit caps would not work, as it would be, and I quote, relatively easy for providers to reallocate income and expenditure to maintain profit levels. Does the Right Honourable Lady agree? And is the 8.8% level of profit she referred to this morning as a maximum level of profit that she is aiming for? And if not, what will it be? The capacity problem obviously rests both on the availability of places and the demand for those places. The Secretary of State has indicated that she would like to take steps on early intervention, which is obviously vital. These are not specified in the statement, but I hope she's able to bring them forward to the House at the earliest opportunity, as they are critical to solving this issue. The Secretary of State says in her statement that she wants to scrap payments by results. Can she inform the House, given this is an early intervention programme, on what evidence basis she's doing this? Does she have an evaluation of what scrapping it will actually do? We welcome much else in this statement, including the regional care cooperatives, multi-agency teams and the enhanced role of Ofsted in the sector. On the latter, can the Secretary of State outline whether she's making any changes to the failure regime for children's homes and the regularity of inspection? The Children's Commissioner has done some astounding work on the increasing use of deprivation of liberty orders. Can the Secretary of State outline what action she's taking on this important issue? And I'm pleased to see the Labour government take forward our proposal for a unique child identifier. When can we expect the bill creating this to be introduced into Parliament? Mr Speaker, I want the government to succeed in this area. Getting children's social care right is a hidden issue at the heart of solving so many problems this country faces. And I hope the Secretary of State can reassure me and the House she will do more to bring forward the greatest supply of looked-after children's places and that an early intervention system is forthcoming, because the future of looked-after children rely on it.
Secretary of State.
I can say to the Right Honourable Lady that absolutely we will do more. We are doing more in 4 months than they did in 14 years. 14 years, Mr Speaker, they had, and the Right Honourable Lady has the temerity to stand there and carp about changes that we are bringing in for some of the most vulnerable children in our country. Markets were left to fail, costs were left to soar, and worst of all, children were failed. We will make sure, Mr Speaker, that there are high-quality placements for our children who need that provision. That is why we did set out £90 million to expand capacity and provision for children who need it. But I also say, Mr Speaker, that we have to break this cycle of crisis intervention that is leading to spiralling costs, poor outcomes and is bankrupting local councils. That's why we will have much more of a focus on kinship, foster care and early intervention to support families, because I know that often where families are supported at the earliest possible moment, we can prevent problems escalating, and she will know that too. I am determined that we build a system that gives all of our children the best possible start in life, and that's why I can confirm to the Right Honourable Lady we will give Ofsted the powers that they need to tackle unregistered and illegal provision, to make sure that they are looking at patterns across providers, and we will introduce legislation on everything that we have set out today as soon as parliamentary time allows. But I can say to her that it is urgent and we will act as swiftly as we can. Where it comes to the question that she asked about the Children's Commissioner, I do welcome the work of the Children's Commissioner in this important area. As on many other issues, she has cast a light on an important area of policy where we have not acted swiftly. Her party failed to act. What I would just gently point out to her is that the Children's Commissioner carried out that work on behalf of the Department for Education. Mr Speaker, the party opposite had 14 years to tackle these issues. I note that the Right Honourable Lady welcomed some of the measures that we have set out today. But when we set out legislation before this House to tackle the shameful failure that we have inherited, I hope that members opposite will back us and, more importantly, back vulnerable children in our country.
Chair of the Select Committee, Helen Hayes.
I welcome the action the Government has announced today to improve children's social care. The Secretary of State will know that families from the poorest neighbourhoods are 14 times more likely to be referred to children's social care than those from the richest areas, and that there is a growing body of evidence linking child poverty to the rise in children entering the care system. How will the Secretary of State ensure that the upcoming child poverty strategy delivers more stability and safety for children and ensures that fewer families enter the kind of crisis that result in their children being removed from their care?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend who has long championed this cause and brings considerable expertise to the role that she now undertakes as Chair of the Select Committee, and I look forward to discussing these issues with her and her committee in due course. She is right to identify that child poverty is a significant issue in this area. It's why we got the work of the Child Poverty Task Force underway in August, because we know that work is crucial. And what she has set out today is something that I've heard from parents the length and breadth of the country as part of the work that we are undertaking. It is important that we make sure that alongside tackling child poverty, we are making sure that all families have early support and early intervention to make sure that they can thrive and that, as she describes, problems do not escalate in the way that they currently do.
Munira Wilson, the Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The Honourable Member for Whitehaven and Workington's review of social care in 2022 found that without reform, by 2032 there could be almost 100,000 children in care, costing an extra £5 billion a year. So it's essential that we recognise the scale and the urgency of this crisis and move quickly, unlike the previous Conservative government. So today's announcements are a welcome step forward. Tackling profiteering will not just help to address the financial crisis facing councils, but to deliver better outcomes for our most vulnerable children and young people, children for whom we all bear huge responsibility in this place. And it's simply unacceptable that they've become a cash cow for private equity companies, raking in profits of 28% or more. So could the Secretary of State spell out when will we see these reforms implemented, and when does she anticipate the backstop will take effect? Cracking down on profiteering is only one side of the bargain. To put provision on a stable and sustainable footing, we must also ensure that councils can provide these services themselves where necessary. So will the government work to support local authorities in running children's homes where they want to do so and where there is need? Many of these private equity firms are also profiteering from children's special schools, and indeed we're starting to see them in the early years sector too. Is the Secretary of State looking at those areas, and will she perhaps apply some of the announcements she's made today to those areas? A new focus, Mr Speaker, on family care is very welcome. Early support for families can keep children out of care who don't need to be there. Kinship carers are unsung heroes who often step up at a moment's notice to look after family members. So will the Secretary of State please commit to moving beyond the very limited pilots that are currently proposed with a universal allowance for kinship carers on a par with foster carers, and take the opportunity in the Employment Rights Bill before the House at the moment to legislate for paid employment leave for kinship carers? All the evidence points to better outcomes, and she will make cost savings immediately, not just in the long term.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady. On kinship, she has rightly championed the cause of kinship carers for many years in this House, and I pay tribute to her for drawing attention to this crucial area. The measures that we set out in the budget represent the single biggest investment in kinship care ever made by a government. But I say to the Honourable Lady, I do recognise that this is an important first step, but not the only action that we need to take in this area. And I will, of course, work with her and members across this House to make sure that kinship carers have all the support that they need. Where it comes to the other questions that she asked, Mr Speaker, she is right that all of us, we bear a responsibility in this House to make sure that we represent the needs and voices of vulnerable children who often aren't heard in our deliberations. We will seek to bring forward measures as soon as parliamentary time allows, because we know that the crisis we face is urgent. Where it comes to councils providing services, yes, Mr Speaker, we will work with councils in terms of what they can provide, either directly or working with charities or others. I have seen some great examples across the country where that is already happening. But what councils need is a government giving them further backing to do that on a bigger scale, and that's why the plans that we're setting out today will provide for precisely that. Around profiteering, what I can say, Mr Speaker, is that today I am calling time on the excess profiteering that we have seen, and should providers not respond, we will not hesitate to bring forward measures to cap their profits. And on special schools and the question that she answers, yes, we are looking very closely at that issue too.
Darren Paffey.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I welcome this statement. It's something that those of us with care experience and those of us who worked in this area have wanted to see for years, so I thank her for it. Would she agree with me that it's entirely regrettable that my honourable friend's work was commissioned by the previous government and then left on a shelf to get dusty? And would she reassure everyone working in this area that under this Labour government, every penny will go towards helping young people to thrive in their experience and not just to survive and line the pockets of profiteers?
Mr Speaker, I pay tribute to my honourable friend who has consistently spoken of his personal experience, and I think demonstrates to so many young people that what can be achieved despite overcoming barriers. But he knows as well as I do that far too many care experienced young people in our country lack the support and backing that they deserve, and we are determined to change that. He is also right to point to the excellent work of our honourable friend. I am delighted that we were able to work to set out today many developments that arise from that crucial work that was undertaken. There is so much more that we need to do together to put right at the heart of our policy making the rights and needs of vulnerable children.
Stuart.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I do regret, Mr Speaker, I don't know why I didn't mean to knock you down a peg, Mr Speaker. That would be very, very unwise. In response to the Shadow Secretary of State, I did regret the Secretary of State's tone, and I hope on issues such as this over time she may learn not to adopt it. As her shadow said, there is a capacity crisis now, and as she said, we need greater early intervention now. Is the Secretary of State confident that she has the resource to support local authorities and others to ensure that this twin challenge can be tackled, because both parts need to be tackled at the same time, and it's a truly serious undertaking?
Secretary of State.
Mr Speaker, I'm not quite sure where to begin with that frankly extraordinary first part of the contribution from the right honourable gentleman. But to take the more serious point that he raised, yes, we are absolutely determined to make sure that we have the resources and support in place for the most vulnerable children in our country. And the reason I do get so cross when I hear some of the contributions from members opposite is that at the time I served as Shadow Secretary of State and as Secretary of State, I've heard directly from far too many children who have been badly failed by this system. It is shocking, it is shameful, and we will change it.
Sureena Brackenridge.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Years of inaction by previous Conservative governments has led to vulnerable children feeling forgotten and councils financially crippled. How will my right honourable friend make sure that reforms truly prioritise children's well-being and tackle the profiteering that's been made at their expense?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. She brings real expertise from education to this House, and education is also a crucial area where we need to work together in terms of safeguarding to make sure that school staff, teachers and others have a role to play in keeping children safe and making sure that all children can thrive. The steps that we are setting out today will make a big change to the life chances and well-being of so many children across our country, and I'm grateful for her support in this important work.
Steve Darling.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And for far too long, children's services have been a Cinderella department, and I'm delighted that Secretary of State is shining a light and driving a positive way forward for this service. My concern, Mr Speaker, is that what we need to do is ensure that our communities are kinship care friendly and foster friendly. How will the Secretary of State drive that particular agenda? Thank you.
Secretary of State.
I agree that there is still much more that we need to do to support kinship carers and foster families. That's why the measures that we set out in the budget are so important. But I know from speaking to kinship carers in my own constituency on Friday, Mr Speaker, that there are still too many barriers that are in place. Differences between local authorities, issues around access to mental health support, the need to do more to support kinship carers to balance work and caring responsibilities, and I look forward to working with the right honourable gentleman in these important areas.
Amanda Martin.
The almost 600 kinship carers in Portsmouth North welcome the privatisation this government has made in kinship care. It's vital to keep kids with their families. But, Mr Speaker, not all children can live with their families, and so will live within the care system. And, Mr Speaker, because of the last 14 years of the Conservative government, life has been too tough. Can the Secretary of State tell us a little more about what this government will do to support those care leavers?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. She is right to highlight that, sadly, for some children it is a necessary step for their own safety and well-being and their long-term futures for a move to a different kind of placement outside of family care. What we're doing is rolling out nationally the Staying Close programme to make sure that all care leavers get the support that they deserve. We're also setting out plans around corporate parenting to make sure that all of us fulfil our responsibilities to children for whom we are responsible. And I was delighted to chair with the Deputy Prime Minister the Care Leavers Ministerial Board, because across government there is more that all of us need to do to ensure that care-experienced young people have their voices heard and we make sure we take action to address their concerns.
We're a Hobart.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. 5 years ago, Bath and North East Somerset Children's Services budget was 28 million. This year it is projected to be 40 million, and particularly transport costs are spiralling out of control as private providers place, it seems, young people deliberately out of area. What my council needs, apart from potential price controls, is investment, so that they're capital investment, so that they can rebuild their in-house services. Will the Minister commit to that, please?
I agree that costs are spiralling out of control and that more action is necessary to support councils to invest in services and also to make sure that there is provision much closer to home for children. We know that not only are too many children being sent much further away from family support networks, but that also that does present additional cost pressures for local councils. It is pushing many to the point of bankruptcy, but alongside that, it denies children the life chances that they deserve.
Florence Etchen-Lomé.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the Secretary of State will be aware that local authorities have a legal duty to house unintentionally homeless people, including those in priority need, like care leavers 18 to 19 and people with dependent children. At our Housing Committee, we heard that, shockingly, over 150,000 children are in temporary accommodation in England. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that without urgent action on the housing crisis, we will not see the improvements for care leaver children?
I agree, Mr Speaker, and I know that our right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, is absolutely determined to drive forward change in this area, not just with more homes being built across our country, including social homes, but also to take action in the area that my honourable friend just described there when children are leaving the care system. So I can give her the assurance that this government will act in those areas.
Ellie Charles.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I warmly welcomed a statement today by the Secretary of State. She's right that it's long overdue. She's also right that early intervention is absolutely key. Too many children in this country are in care because they and their families didn't get the support and help that they needed when they needed it. Now, she referenced the report led by the now Honourable Member for Whitehaven and Workington, which stated that we need a revolution in family help, and specifically a £2.6 billion temporary injection of financial support to make that shift to prevention. Can she make that commitment?
Mr Speaker, I'm sure my honourable friend will speak for himself in terms of his report. What I can say for the government is that we do recognise the need to rebalance the system away from crisis intervention, to break that cycle of crisis where we spend ever-increasing pots of money on what amounts to a failure within our system. We will refocus our work on early support for families. We will make sure that there is more support there for kinship and fostering families too. That is not just important where it comes to the cost of the interventions that we increasingly see, but most crucially of all, it is how we will deliver better life chances for the most vulnerable children in our country.
Gareth Snell.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, as someone who grew up in a kinship care setting, in my case with my grandparents, I heartily welcome the content of this paper, and I think the provisions that are laid out today, had they been available to my grandparents, it would have been a very different growing up experience for me, so I heartily welcome what the Secretary of State is doing today. But could I say to the Secretary of State, for those young people that do have to enter the care system, it can't be a one-way process, and ageing out can't be the only exit. Could she set out a little bit more about what this paper will do to help with the unification process so that those young people who go into care can go back to their parents? And could I encourage you to look at the work of Pause, a national charity that's doing so much work with the birth parents of children who get taken to care, so that they get the help and support they need after what can be a very traumatic experience?
Secretary.
Mr Speaker, can I thank my honourable friend for speaking about his experiences in this area. He will know that until quite recently, this area was perhaps little understood, and it is so important that people like him are able to speak openly, which I think demonstrates both bravery but will also encourage others to do the same too. I will happily look at the report and the work that he sets out and the area that he has identified about making sure that there are routes back towards family care for those children where it is possible are considered as part of our ongoing work.
Bobby Dean.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In the London Borough of Sutton, we started to in-house some children's care home provision back in 2020, and we now care for 6 of the most complex children needs that we need to. What assessment has the department made of the potential scale of local authorities taking on services directly if given the right support by the government?
Like the Honourable Gentleman, I've also seen good examples, Mr Speaker, of councils across the country who have started to take that action, but they have done so against the grain of government policy. This time, councils will have the backing of government in making those changes happen. We will also make sure that they're able to take forward action on a regional basis so that they can manage placements more effectively, so that they can work together and collaborate, because that is how we will not just bring down costs to the taxpayer, which are spiralling out of control, but how we will also make sure that children can stay closer to family support networks, which is crucial to their long-term futures.
Dr. Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As someone who spent 14 years watching children's services struggle in the way that the Secretary of State outlines, and so often seeing serious case reviews being the moment of intervention, I heartily welcome the emphasis on early intervention and what she says about the responsibility of all of us. She will know that there has been much discussion about this concept of corporate parenting. Can I ask her what her thinking is on this, and particularly what role she sees for us as members of Parliament? Because at the moment those relationships across the country are clearly too inconsistent, and that is to the detriment of safeguarding and indeed to our young people.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. She is right to identify that there are many long-standing challenges in this area. Where it comes to corporate parenting, as part of the command paper that I've set out today, we set out further steps that we intend to take around bringing forward further plans in this area. I look forward to working with her on the shape and scale of those plans, because I think it is essential that all of us take our responsibilities incredibly seriously, as I know that she does too.
Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I welcome the Secretary of State's broad commitment to reduce the number of children who need to go into care. And building on the comments of the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent Central, I wanted to emphasise the work that PAWS does in West Sussex with the County Council and over 24 other authorities. They have a vision of ensuring that no one should go through having a child taken into care more than once. But, Mr Speaker, more than half of areas have no support available for parents after a child is removed from their care, leading to many being trapped in a cycle of pregnancies, care proceedings and repeat removals. What assurances can the Secretary of State give that this valuable work will be more widely rolled out across the country, and will she meet with me in PAWS to discuss how this work can be taken forward?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful, Mr Speaker. I'm sure my honourable friend will be happy to meet with the honourable lady to discuss this issue further. She is right to identify the need for support for families where a child or children might have been removed, and the need for ongoing support in that area. I also say to her that before I came to this House, I did work with many families who were in that situation, and I saw directly not just how much of a difference could be made to the lives of those children and families, but also often where mothers in particular were going through subsequent pregnancies, how that intervention and support could be crucial in making sure that children were able to stay with the mother where possible. That can't sadly always be the case, but I think with the right level of support there is so much more that can be achieved, and certainly I saw some amazing examples where it was possible to break sadly what had felt like a cycle.
Matt Robb.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. May I thank all those working so hard to support vulnerable children in our country. Mr Speaker, I would like to thank the Secretary of State for her statement today and excellent steps forward. May I ask her for a little more clarity on the important point she made about the need for greater co-production with charities and other agencies?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. As we take forward further proposals, both in terms of legislation but also wider change and reform across the sector, we look forward to working with family rights organisations, with charities and others to make sure that they are involved in the design of services, but also, as he identifies, our brilliant workforce, often unsung, who do their work often behind the scenes without the recognition that they deserve. Our social work workforce and others do a crucial role, and we are determined to do more to support them in their vital endeavours.
Colin Miller.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I warmly welcome the statement today from the Secretary of State. As a county councillor in Oxfordshire, the number of children in our care living in unregistered children's homes is of grave concern. They are often overpriced and always suboptimal for vulnerable children, as well as being strictly illegal. I heard what the Secretary of State had to say about the local authority settlement next month. Will the Secretary of State undertake to work with the Deputy Prime Minister and the Chancellor to allocate some of the capital investment that was announced in the budget so that local authorities can open new registered children's homes and provide more safe and affordable accommodation closer to home for vulnerable young people?
Secretary of State.
I agree, and I will be working very closely with the Chancellor and the Deputy Prime Minister in this area. He is right to highlight the increase in unsafe, unregistered placements. That's why we are giving Ofsted further powers to act. And what I also set out today in the command paper is that we will make sure that councils and others have the powers that they need available to them to deliver more placements for children. And I would encourage the honourable gentleman to look closely at that work. I think he will find that there is much that he can welcome.
Emma Lulba.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I welcome my right honourable friend's considerate focus. Children in care have died in unregulated accommodation, but this did not stop the last Conservative government introducing cruel legislation to make it permissible for councils to place children in care aged 16 and above into such accommodation. Tents, caravans, B&Bs, HMOs, surrounded by adult strangers and with no continuing care at all. Please, will my friend overturn this legislation?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend, who I know from her professional expertise before coming to this House, understands better than most how important social work, early intervention and support for families is in this area. She is right to identify that we see an increasing number of children in unsafe and unregistered placements. They are illegal to run, but Ofsted found 887 unregistered homes, up from 370 in 2022-23. We will give Ofsted the powers that they need to tackle unregistered provision. We need to hit providers where it hurts who are behaving in this way, as the threat of prosecution clearly isn't working.
Sureena.
Thank
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Somerset Council is facing a £7.5 million overspend on children's services this financial year, with an increased number of children coming into care. Now, I welcome the pledge to provide early interventions as they provide better outcomes for children while keeping costs down for councils. So can the Secretary of State provide more details on how a joined-up approach will be achieved so that local authorities provide the best possible care for children?
I'm working very closely with Mr Speaker with the Deputy Prime Minister in this crucial area. There will be more to say before too long around the local government finance settlement, but it is important, as she identifies, that we rebalance the children's social care system away from crisis intervention towards more timely and early support. We know that's where we make the biggest difference to children's lives. It is also what's driving the cost pressures that sadly lots of local authorities are seeing at the moment as ever-increasing numbers of children go through the children's social care system. We are determined to make progress, put more support in place earlier for families.
Mark Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I wish to associate myself with the comments of the Secretary of State. But whilst children in care are, of course, incredibly important, it's also important that we do our best for those who are care experienced. In my constituency of Gateshead Central and Wickham, 50% of those who leave care are not in education, employment and training, as I heard about when I was visiting Changing Lives at Islington House in my constituency on Friday. Can the Secretary of State tell me what more can be done for care leavers to support them?
My friend is right to identify that sadly for too many care experienced young people coming out through the system, their outcomes are just not good enough, and the facts are very stark in terms of their life chances. We are determined to change this. I'm working very closely with the Deputy Prime Minister as part of the Ministerial Care Leavers Board, because there are actions across many government departments that would make a really big and meaningful difference to the life chances of care experienced young people. What was incredibly powerful, Mr Speaker, as a part of that was to listen to the experiences of two young people who had just come through the system themselves. I think in all of our discussions in this important area, we must listen to the experiences and views of those who have direct lived experience of how the system has let them down and what needs to change in future.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Devon County Council's Children's Services was assessed by Ofsted in April, and it found that the Children's Front Door service was effective after previously having been deemed by Ofsted to be inadequate. So when the government and when the Secretary of State simplifies and consolidates the money available through the local government finance settlement, will she be sure to take into account the additional costs that are borne by rural local authorities?
Mr Speaker, we will look at all factors, including the factor the Honourable Gentleman identifies, but also areas of good practice where I know many local councils, despite the many difficulties that they face, are really taking forward innovative new ways of working and are doing all that they can to support children and families. And I think there is much that we can learn from those good examples that exist across the country.
Toby Perkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. In Derbyshire, the Conservative leader of the County Council has got in touch with me and other MPs in the last Parliament to plead with us to do something about the profiteering taking place amongst the private sector. Nothing happened under the last government. We heard from the Shadow Secretary of State that if we do anything to try and curb that profiteering, we'll lose capacity. I agree with her. I think councils have a greater role to play. Does she agree that if councils have their own provision, it actually empowers them to prevent this profiteering that's being done by extortionate private providers sometimes?
Mr Speaker, I agree with my honourable friend, and he is right to identify that there is support for such measures right across political parties because children are being let down by our failure. We must absolutely do more to improve capacity. We will support councils working together to do that. I've seen some great examples of where that has happened. There is much more that needs to be done because, as he identifies, it is about making sure that children get the support that they need in order to thrive, and in this government they will have support in that crucial area.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I very much welcome the Secretary of State's statement today. It's incredibly good news, and thank you very much for that. I think we all welcome that across this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Barnabas charity in Northern Ireland have indicated for a long time that they've been very concerned, so the statement today is something that they welcome as well. I want to put that on record. We in Northern Ireland, Secretary of State, have the highest rate of kinship care along with Scotland, but a streamlined process with a decent funding level would enable greater buy-in by those who have lots of love but not enough money. Any increase needs to see additional funding to devolved regions as well. Is the Secretary of State able to confirm that? Thank you so much.
Secretary of State.
Mr Speaker, I'd say to the right honourable gentleman that I'm actually visiting Northern Ireland very soon, so I look forward to discussing both that area but also wider issues relating to education with counterparts in Northern Ireland.
Weston.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I welcome the comments from my right honourable friend. The more I hear about this, the more I think it's a bit of a Wild West that this government has inherited from the previous one. So shocking is the situation in children's social care. Would my right honourable friend agree to meet with me to talk about a particular issue in my constituency with a foster carer, which I think exemplifies just the scale of the problem that is faced?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for drawing the House's attention to this area. I'd be more than happy to meet with him. And he is right that the situation that we have inherited is one where too many children are being let down, where the quality of the provision for very vulnerable children is just not good enough. And I look forward to working with him to make that change happen.
Jonathan Brash.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. With over 300 children in Hartlepool in social care, the council is being slowly bankrupted. The top 4 private providers, on average, are charging £12,000 per child per week. That's £624,000 a year per child. Does my honourable friend agree with me that only by capping that outrageous profiteering can we protect children but also get value for money for local council taxpayers?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. Private providers are making, in some cases, between 20 to 30% profit, way beyond what you would expect in any other area. But also, when you think, crucially, to where they are making this profit, it is off the backs of the trauma, abuse and sometimes very difficult early childhood experiences of some of the most vulnerable children in our country. He is right that the issue that he identifies in Hartlepool is sadly felt right across the country, and he may wish to know that there are now over 1,500 children in placements, each costing £500,000 every single year. Mr Speaker, we've got to change that.
Nadia Whitton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Analysis by the LGA reveals that the top 15 private children's social care providers are making an average profit of 23%. It's frankly unacceptable that private firms are profiting at all from vulnerable children, but let alone when the care that they provide is so often poor and is funded by public money, pushing councils to the brink. So I commend the government's plans to tackle this urgent issue. Will my right honourable friend also commit to properly funding not-for-profit and public sector provision to improve children's social care and to end this obscene profiteering for good?
It is vital that we drive up the standards and quality in children's social care placements, and we want to make sure that we're providing support for councils, for charities and others to do precisely that. The highest possible standards and quality of care are essential for children and young people who have been through some very traumatic experiences and deserve our full support. I agree where it comes to excess profiteering, we must take action. It has been left to drift for far too long, and this government will act.
David Baines.
Very much, Mr Speaker. I warmly welcome this, like all colleagues, I think, on this side of the House and hopefully the whole House. And I particularly welcome the comments about care leavers as well. I think that's really important that we don't forget about them. So when I became council leader at St Helens in 2019, services for care leavers were rated inadequate by Ofsted. I'm proud to say now they're outstanding. Credit for that goes to Councillor Nova Charlton and all our Children's Services team, and the Secretary of State is more than welcome to visit St Helens to hear about the good work they do and how they do it. But will she tell me a bit more about what steps she's taking with colleagues in order to make sure local government has the funding it needs to run these services, because it does have to be a whole council effort, and if one part fails, the whole falls down.
Sean Davis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I commend my honourable friend and his council for the work that they have undertaken in order to deliver better outcomes for care experienced young people. It is absolutely crucial. I'm sure that there is much that we can learn from that work. I'm sure my honourable friend will be happy to have a conversation with my honourable friend to discuss that further. We will be setting out further steps in terms of making clear the funding arrangements, but it is essential that we put more money into children's social care. We are doing that, and we will set out more in due course through the local government finance settlement.
Sean Davis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the reforming zeal of the Secretary of State on this area? The work has been outstanding. As somebody who's led a council for the previous 8 years, double outstanding accreditation, and all praise goes to council staff for that, can we learn from the best within the sector as well? And can we ensure that where local government sees profiteering, that local government can also trigger a review? In one case in Telford, a bill for one place went to £409,000 almost overnight. And I also say, Madam Deputy Speaker, a word of caution about consolidating the grant into the local government fund, and an assurance that on that fund it will not be like the public health grant that was consolidated into the local government fund and cut and eroded over a number of years.
Secretary of State.
I join my honourable friend in praising the work of council staff and many councils across our country who have been taking action in this area. I agree that there is much that we can learn from the best examples, both in terms of support for care experienced young people, but also the approach that they have taken around children's social care overall. I look forward to working with him in that area. I note the point that he raises. Where it comes to making sure that local councils have a role into the system around financial oversight, we will of course take into account his views. The regime that we will be setting out will allow us to provide much clearer and greater scrutiny of those providers who are frankly profiting in a way that is shameful from some of the most vulnerable children in our country.
Sarah Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm really pleased to hear the statement today for care leavers, and one of the things that I wanted to raise was that children who leave care have previously been let down by a system that pretty much stops support once they leave care. And so that care experienced young people can make the most of their futures, could the Secretary of State outline the plans the government has to support care leavers in Tamworth and around the country so that they can gain the skills and the experience that they need to thrive?
Secretary of State.
My honourable friend is right to identify the urgent need to do more to support care leavers, both at the point at which they move through the system, but also right throughout their lives too. That's why I'm working with the Deputy Prime Minister and with other colleagues across government, so we all pull together and do much more to deliver better life chances for care leavers. We will roll out nationally the Staying Close programme to make sure that all young people leaving care have the support that they need. We are also setting out corporate parenting proposals to make sure that all of us are pulling together to listen to the views and experiences of young people. And I'm sure that she, like me, has heard directly from care leavers about how badly they feel failed by a system that has not properly reflected their needs, their experiences, and it is vital that in our discussions today we put front and centre the needs of care experienced young people.
Jonathan Davies.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the statement and the robust steps that the government is taking for our children and young people. I was very disappointed to read a report from Ofsted last week into the SEND provision in Derbyshire, which found there to be systemic failings and the provision was inadequate. Our children and young people deserve so much better. But I was wondering whether she might have made an assessment about how the failure to deal with SEND under the previous government has fuelled problems in children's social care now. And can I also ask her if she agrees with me that more integration is needed between education, healthcare, local authorities and providers, including through integrated care boards and partnerships, to really deliver lasting and sustained outcomes for our young people.
Yeah. Secretary of State.
I agree with my honourable friend that joint working is so important. It also provides much clearer support for families who often don't want to have to repeat their experiences time and again to different sets of professionals and want better and more targeted support. I've seen great examples, including in Lewisham just earlier this week, where the Pathfinder programme is making sure that all children get the support that they need through more timely intervention, but also working closely with families. And I know that Derby City Council have done some excellent work in this area too. There is an overlap, Madam Deputy Speaker, between children's social care and SEND, similar challenges. We want to make sure that where there is practice that can be shared between those two areas, we do that.
Sarah Coombs.
Children in care are some of the most vulnerable in our society, and many people in Sandwell are worried about the children that are in small care homes that often seem to lack oversight and regulation. I really welcome the measures the government set out today. Will the Secretary of State ensure that Ofsted has the powers it needs to inspect children's social care and make sure that all homes are suitable and safe places for children to be?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for sharing her concerns and bringing the concerns of her constituents to this House. We will act to make sure that Ofsted have the powers they need to tackle unregistered, unsafe and unsuitable placements and accommodation. Our most vulnerable children deserve the best possible support, and right now we're sadly far away from that.
Josh McAllister.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The outcomes for children and families involved in the children's social care system are some of the worst in our country, and this truly is a huge social justice issue, so I really welcome the leadership shown by the Secretary of State and her team on this important issue so soon into the new government's time in office. So many of the recommendations came from the contributions of those with lived experience directly, whether it's regional care cooperatives, expanding corporate parenting, the importance of a unique child identifier, and the changes to Ofsted that have been announced. So would the Secretary of State agree with me that the contribution made to the review that I led by thousands of people who've got lived experience, who are often so unheard and unseen in society, is validated by the announcement today?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I pay tribute to my honourable friend who did tremendous work in this area. I'm delighted that we've been able to act in many of the areas that he identified as part of his review. He is also, of course, right to draw our attention to the thousands of people, including those with lived experience, who contributed to his vital work. It is testament to his work, to their contributions, that this government is able to take forward so many areas that will make a significant difference to the lives and experiences of vulnerable children across our country from today over many years to come.
Alex Sobel.
Thank you. I'd really like to thank the Secretary of State for his statement and to the Minister for a recent visit to my constituency. The exemplary work of Leeds City Council are currently focusing on small group homes to bring children back to Leeds from private provision outside of the city, which will give much better outcomes and save significant costs, and focusing on early help and intervention. I know the Minister saw all of that work when she was in Leeds. Will the Secretary of State, who I absolutely welcome the work on regional care cooperatives, give further clarification what support will be available for local authorities to look at alternative models of care over and above those cooperatives?
Secretary of State.
My humble friends, local authority has done brilliant work in this area. We are keen to build on the best examples that exist already around the country. I know my honourable friend, the Minister, was impressed with everything that she saw as part of that visit. We are determined to make sure that we are backing councils and the ability for councils to work regionally to deliver better placements closer to home, and also bringing children back into their local area wherever possible. He will know, as I do, that children thrive when they are close to family and support networks. It also allows for much stronger and better life chances as they move into adulthood, and I look forward to working with him to make sure that councils have the powers to do more, and we'll be setting out more as soon as parliamentary time allows.
Lola McAvoy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is so refreshing to see a Labour Secretary of State take action on profiteering in our local authorities. This is something I've been calling for, as in my constituency of Darlington, the average cost of an independent residential placement has increased by 65% in the last 5 years. Despite this, our Labour-led council continue to fight to give decent and good quality placements to all of our looked-after children. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that tackling this practice of excess profiteering, largely ignored by the last government, is exactly what we were elected to do? To get value for taxpayers' money and to make sure that vital services like looking after our vulnerable children deliver the best possible outcomes for children who we are determined will succeed.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for all of my honourable friend's work in this area. She is right that councils were left at the mercy of private providers, often paying extortionate costs for poor quality provision that did not deliver the safety, the dignity and the better life chances for our children. We are determined to turn this around, and I look forward to working with her to make sure that children across our country, including those going through the children's social care system, have their voices heard in place. Their struggles, their challenges, for too long ignored. Under this government, action follows.
Josh Fenton-Glynn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In my time as a councillor and a corporate parent, nothing was more distressing than some of the complex safeguarding issues we had to deal with. But then, of course, nothing was more enraging than seeing people profit from that, and that's why Calderdale Council did some good work in bringing children's homes in-house. I hope that this statement means an end to that profiteering.
State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we are calling time on the excess profiteering of big private providers who are seeing profits of 20 to 30%. If they fail to act and bring down costs, then we will legislate to cap their costs, because this cannot continue. It has been left adrift for far too long, and local authorities such as his have been up against it, often facing an impossible task, but doing some great work where they can. We will work with councils, including on a regional basis, to provide accommodation for children and young people closer to home, higher quality, better standards, and tackling unregistered and illegal provision.
And final question, Jake Richards.
I'm very grateful, Madam Deputy Chair. It's brilliant to see a Secretary of State take this issue so seriously and get a grip of it so early on in government. Last week, figures were published that showed the number of children placed far from home has increased by 51% between 2014 and 2024 over the last decade. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that it's not only about capacity or quality or cost, but also the geography of these placements to ensure when children are placed away from their families, they can stay in touch?
Secretary of State.
My honourable friend is right, and there are big differences in terms of geography. What I found quite astounding was that 25% of registered places are in the northwest of England. That is a staggering number, and it means that sadly far too many children are moving far from home, away from family networks, moving school or education provision, and we need to make sure that that changes, that our most vulnerable children, who have often been through incredibly traumatic early childhood experiences and been exposed to things that no child should ever see or witness, get the best possible support and the best possible standards. And I look forward to working with my honourable friend to drive up standards and to make sure that every child in his constituency who needs support through children's social care has a much better experience and better adult life chances too.
Can I thank the Secretary of State for her statement and allow a few moments so the front benches can swap over. Those who are leaving the chamber, could you please